Attention old school wrestling fans. Do you remember the sweet and innocent times of the 1980s and 1990s? Do you remember the time when storylines actually made sense? When storylines actually had a conclusion rather than being dropped in the middle of them? Do you remember the greats like Ric Flair, like Sting, like Ricky Steamboat, like Ravishing Rick Rude, like the Million Dollar Man Ted DiBiase, Bret the Hitman Hart, the Macho Man Randy Savage, Demolition, what a great team they were, the Legion of Doom when they were at their best, the Rockers, the Hart Foundation, the Midnight Express. Do you remember amazing managers with colour like James E. Cornette, Jimmy the Mouth of the South Hart, Harley Race? No, that's just a joke. But he was a great wrestler, to be fair, and a pretty good manager. But maybe not one of the best. Paulie Dangerously, that's probably the other one. When women really stood out, not just for how beautiful they were, but for their personalities, like Medusa, like, well, not Missy Hyatt. I was going to say Missy Hyatt, but that's unfair. But at least she stood out. At least she could control the spotlight. At least she stood out rather than getting lost in the field. Or what about Sensational Sherry? A real trooper, a real star. Some of her promos were to die for, and she really put her body on the line for her fellows. Anyway, this long-winded list and point is because coming very soon to my channel, I will be reviewing old school wrestling from the 1980s and 1990s, and I am talking about when WWF, as it was now known in that day, was the good shit, when it provided me hours and hours of great entertainment, when characters were actually proper characters and you had some fantastic wrestling matches and some fantastic feuds as well, and also the WCW, NWA / WCW days as well. Just when wrestling was at its most exciting and before it was sort of ruined by the internet and ruined by television bookers, people from TV background who didn't understand wrestling, and just when there was competition. I think the WWF, as it's now known, the WWE, needs competition to drive it on. And I mean, what better competition than during the Monday Night Wars? How great it was then you had ECW, regardless of what you think of that as a promotion. It was a fringe promotion. It did provide an alternative for fans who weren't into the big two like WWF and WCW. But what can I say? I have a nostalgia for those days and for the Monday Night Wars and for WCW, even the WCW of the early 90s, as terrible as it was. That's the other thing to say too. I think there's something about bad wrestling from the 90s which is still very entertaining and which you can enjoy. It's almost like watching a bad like horror movie or B movie. Sometimes it's just so dumb and unbelievable, then you do enjoy it just for how trashy it is. Whereas nowadays with wrestling, if it's bad wrestling, you don't enjoy it. You just get bored, and I think it's just because it's just become this overlong recession. In the case of WWE anyway, it's just become this really awful like corporation, just churning out storyline after storyline, match after match, with no real feeling, no real excitement, no real. It's just bad in a boring sort of way, like been there, done that sort of thing, and you're not being entertained with it. At least, as shitty as WCW was during its time, and it had many ups and downs, and WWF for that matter. I'm not letting them escape from this, but it was the sort of trash you could enjoy on occasions. Obviously, sometimes it was so bad it was just bad. But anyway, yes, wrestling from these eras particularly, and I would probably add like the early 2000s to that as well, maybe. But one of my passions, it's provided me many hours of entertainment, and let's face it, there's just so much to talk about with professional wrestling, especially from days gone by. So very soon I will be doing long running review projects on this channel, and I'm going to start off with a biggie. I'm going to start off by reviewing every WCW pay-per-view from the 1990s. And what a decade it was. What a roller coaster ride it was. Not only for WCW, but for wrestling in general. And it's fair to say that during those 10 years of the 90s, you saw the very best and the very worst of WCW and for pro wrestling. I'll chronicle not only the best and worst of each pay-per-view, but I will also take a look at the times and what was going on in pro wrestling around the time. I might even, feature some WWF talk and some other promotion talks. But I will break down each pay-per-view. I'll take a look at each match, give it my overall thoughts. I will also give it a rating. I'll give it a star rating out of 5 stars, basically. And then I'll rate each pay-per-view. And I'll do that out of 10. I'll use the 10 system for that. So a number out of 10, obviously. I'll break down my best match, my worst match, and as I said, an overall rating for each pay-per-view and comments. So I'll go through, depending on how much there is to talk about, I'll go through each pay-per-view in a fair amount of detail. So this is something I've been doing over, and I'll give this a plug, but over on the Wrestling Smacks forum. So you can find my ongoing pay-per-view reviews over there in written form, and I also include some videos. So I'll post a link to that in the description. But yeah, I thought it's a great thing to do for this channel. Hopefully it will interest some of you, might bring in a few new viewers. But pop wrestling really is one of those staples of pop culture. And the 1990s, a fascinating time, not only for wrestling, but for WCW. Some really ups and downs, some various like changeover in direction and in who was running the ship there. And some of the biggest stars ever to grace a wrestling ring. Just so much to talk about. And I'm looking forward to getting down to it. Now, my first review will be of Wrestle War 1990 from February of that year. It's called Wild Thing. It's headlined by a world title match between Ric Flair and the Total Package Lex Luger. You also have the likes of the Midnight Express on there. You have the Z-Man and Flying Brian. They face off against the Fabulous Freebirds in I think it's a US tag title match from what I can remember. So from some massive stars, some massive storylines, and it's a very interesting era because it's still when WCW were like co-promoting with the old NWA, the NWA, which of course dates back to the early 1900s, so almost 100 years at that point. But very interesting time because it's during the Jim Herd era where he's taken over, and they're on network TV and all that sort of thing. So quite a bit to talk about. So my first review will be of Wrestle War 1990, and that review should be up in the next couple of weeks. So if you want to track down Wrestle War 90, you want to watch it, and then you'll be ready for the review, because I will go into quite big spoilers. But if you want to comment, it is of course on the WWE Network if you have that. you could possibly find it elsewhere on the internet if not. But, you know, if you're a wrestling fan, it's probably a pretty good chance you've got the WWE Network and the whole show is available on that one. But yeah, if you want to watch Wrestle War 90 ahead of my review, then do so and you can comment. If not, I hope you enjoy the review anyway. So I will do many other projects, but coming up, the start of my look at WCW on pay-per-view in the 1990s, and that review of Wrestle War 90 is coming up in just a matter of days. I hope you enjoy the grappling talk on my channel, and I'll see you guys soon. Goodbye.